Listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Do you know that there are more people alive today than have ever died in the history of the world? Did you know that? And according to Google, as of this month, November 2019, there are 7.7 billion human beings inhabiting planet Earth. And sociologists and psychologists and experts of all kinds would tell us that the majority of us have at least one thing in common. We're not satisfied with what we have right now. No matter how much we have, we want more and more. And that can lead us into all kinds of trouble. Now, today we're going to think about some things that can help us live a more contented life by better managing some of the resources that we already have, especially our financial resources. Now, I get it. You hear financial resources and your internal alarm goes off. Danger, danger, danger. Grab your wallet and your purse. I get it. I get it. This isn't my very first sermon ever. I understand because you have told me over 30-odd years of sharing the message. You've told me that there are 3 things that people don't want to hear from their pastors. Don't tell me who to associate with. Don't tell me who to sleep with. And stay out of my money. These things are none of your business, Pastor. Now, frankly and honestly, I agree with you. There's pretty much nothing that I would least enjoy talking to you about than those 3 things. But I'm also aware of one very human condition. That just because I don't like hearing about these things does not mean that I don't need to hear about these things. And did you know that one of Jesus' most frequently preached on topics was what? Money, finances, how you use them, how you don't use them. Now, why do you think Jesus, who was God, enfleshed, why do you think he would give up valuable preaching time to talk about things like money? Because he wants to be in charge of your wallet? No. Jesus wants your heart. But he knows that one of the rockiest paths you and I will ever walk is the one that deals with our money and how we use it. Because how you think about your resources has significant impact on your being content with your life and how you live it out. Did you know that when you even think about money, you don't even have to talk about it. When you think about money, your blood pressure goes up? Because even if we are safe and have a roof over our heads and food in the fridge, we want more. We're not comfortable with what we have, no matter how much we have. And we're afraid, well, what if I lose what I have now? What then? So we want more. But do we really need more? Maybe, but what if we don't? What if there are ways to lower the stress of finances and lower our concern about not having enough? We'll get into that in a moment, but first let's take a moment to open our hearts to God in prayer. Gracious and loving God, this fine Sunday morning, like every other fine Sunday morning, We come to this place to share the fellowship and the friendship of this community. We come to this place to share the love of this community and the empowering feeling that we get from being connected, from being involved, from belonging into a place of love and care. But mostly this morning we come for a word from you. A valuable word, a necessary word that we need to live life more closely attuned to you and to what you want for us. And we understand that this morning that if we're going to get everything out of the message that we need to get, well, we're going to need to be open to it. So I pray this morning that you send a spirit of openness to us and open our hearts and our minds and our ears so that we can hear what it is that you have to say to us this morning. And I pray, as I do each Sunday that I preach, that you can help me find a way to get out of the way so that it's not my words that come through, but it's your words that stick in people's minds and hearts. All this we pray in your name. Amen. Now, America is most often and traditionally described as a capitalist, service-based culture. Or that used to be the case. But experts tell us that over the past 50 years or so, gradually, capitalist or not, we have gradually transformed a service economy into a self-service economy. The more insatiable our consumption has become, the less effort there seems to be to serve anyone or anything except ourselves. Now, in today's gospel text, Jesus uses a simple parable to demonstrate the foolishness of living a self-serving lifestyle. The already rich farmer in the parable suddenly has even more prosperity thrust upon him when his lands yield a bonanza. He gets a bumper crop. Now, faced with his good fortune, the rich man must seriously and intentionally figure out how he'll handle this surplus. So did he call in the experts? Did he call in financial people? Did he call in a priest? Did he hit his knees in prayers? No, he figured it out himself. Have you ever really stopped to consider how best to handle your surplus? If you should find yourself in that situation of having one, that is. Now, at first, the good farmer's internal discussion seems to bring him to a logical, even sensible conclusion. It's what we've been doing in America for the past 50 years, building bigger storage facilities to store and safeguard our precious goods, goods that we don't use, rarely see, and likely have already replaced with something bigger, faster, or newer. But a further consideration of the farmer's expansion planning reveals the true nature the rich man has for all of his possessions. You will note as you read this text that he doesn't consider sharing the surprise wealth that he comes into. He doesn't care or show any regards for the hurting or the needy. He doesn't voice any concern for keeping the community of which he is a part safe from unexpected future droughts or famines. Instead, the rich farmer's intentions for his good fortune are entirely directed towards himself. His plan, in the end, is to retire, to eat, drink, and be merry. And he assumes that because of his great surpluses, he'll be able to keep up this self-serving lifestyle forever. Wouldn't that be great? But guess what? The rich man is exposed for who and whose he is by none other than God in this parable, who informs the farmer that all his selfish plans, all his hoarding and gloating over his possessions are fruitless. For this very night your life is being demanded of you, Scripture says. All the rich man's treasures will be somebody else's problem tomorrow. Friends, what does it take to make us happy? Have you thought about that? In the midst of your discomfort and uncomfort and lack of content, what is it you really need? Is it what you really want that's important? What does enough look like for us? Have you ever been there? Have you been to a place where you said, okay, I don't have what I want, but boy, what I got's pretty good. The Apostle Paul is an excellent example of contentment through trials and misery. In his letter to the Philippians, he wrote about the secret of his contentment. And if you listen carefully, you may pick up a secret to yours. For I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, or whether living in plenty or in want. Now here's the secret. Listen carefully. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. Everything. Not some things. Not occasionally, not once in a while when I'm feeling lucky. The God who got Paul through beatings, stonings, snake bites, and year after year of the hardest ministry possible. This man says, I can do it all by leaning on the strength that God has offered to me. Friends, with some honest effort like Paul, we can really, I'm not kidding, we can really learn to be content in whatever situation, whatever circumstances we might find ourselves in. But we likely have some changes to make. Now, we've been sharing this sermon series through a book that Adam Hamilton wrote called Enough. And in this, he shares 4 keys, which include the secret that we just heard about. Whatever else you might hear today, whatever else you take with you today, remember the secret. Four words that we need to learn to repeat. It could be worse. John Ortberg, pastor at Menlo Park Presbyterian Church in California, says there are 4 words that we should say whenever we find ourselves discontented with something or someone. It could be worse. This is essentially the practice of learning to look on the bright side or finding the silver lining of a thing. It's recognizing that no matter what we may not like about a thing or a person or a circumstance we're currently in, we can always find something positive to focus on. If we do what? If we choose to do it. Key 2, we ask ourselves one question, especially right before a major purchase. How long will this thing make me happy? So often we buy something big thinking that this will really make us happy, only to find out that the happiness lasts about as long as it takes to unpack whatever the thing is. There's a moment of satisfaction when we make the purchase, but the item doesn't continue to bring the satisfaction over a long period of time. So be careful of impulse buying or guilt buying to keep up with the Joneses. Key 3 is to develop a grateful heart. Gratitude is essential if we're to be content. In 1 Thessalonians, the Apostle Paul said that we are to give thanks in all circumstances. Not just when things are going well. Not just when the bank account's full. we're to learn to be grateful in all circumstances. Because he recognizes what we need to recognize, that all of life is a gift. You didn't give it to yourself. That last breath that you just took, that was a gift from God. Contentment comes when we spend more time giving thanks for what we have than thinking about what's missing or what's wrong in our life. Key 4. He says to ask yourself, where does your soul find true satisfaction? Boy, that's a $64,000 question for people of faith. The world tells us that we find satisfaction in ease and luxury, but the Bible answers this question very, very differently. From Genesis to Revelation, it tells us that we find our satisfaction in God alone. But it seems to me that no matter how many keys for contentment I have, and no matter how good they are, what it really boils down to is to find ways to simplify our lives. Have you looked at your calendar recently? Have you looked at your checkbook recently? Do you know where your time's going? Do you know where your money is really going? We need to simplify our life because contentment and simplicity go hand in hand. Hamilton suggests 5 steps to simplifying our life. Set a goal to live below your means. Now I know that's a whole lot easier for me to stand up here and say than it always is for us to do. But he suggests to set a tangible goal to reduce our own personal consumption and avoid wastage in our life. For example, reuse canvas bags when you go grocery shopping. I'm guessing the majority of us already do something like that. Whenever you're making purchases, look at the mid-grade instead of the top line, if it will serve your purposes. When buying a new car, aim to improve fuel economy over your existing car by at least 10%. Reduce your utilities by 10% by setting the thermostat back a couple of degrees of a night when you're sleeping or when you're not in the house. Now, like I said, I'm guessing most of us are already doing these to some degree. It just makes sense. Step 2, before making a purchase, ask yourself, do I really need this? And if I don't, why do I want this? These questions will help us to determine the true motivation for our desired purchase. Is it a need? Is it a self-esteem issue? Or something else? You may find yourself wrestling with your true motive and decide that your reason for purchasing the item isn't really a good one. Step 3. Use something up before buying something new. Take good care of the things you buy. Use them as long as they function well. Buy things that are made to last, and when buying things that have a short lifespan, do so carefully. Plan entertainment that enriches. One of the things I love about this area is there's so many positive, free things that we can do. There's festivals, there's concerts. I was just having a conversation this morning about the place in Menlo Park that has all the flowers and the observatory.
Duncan Gardens.
Yes, that. And it's free. And the Pacific Northwest has an amazing amount of outdoor activities that won't cost you a dime. And getting out in the fresh air, well, that's good for you too. Step 5, ask yourself, are there major changes that would allow me to simplify my life? Consider downsizing. Cancel clubs or subscriptions that you don't use. Ask yourself questions related to your home and possessions, job, and activities to identify some significant changes that will simplify your life. Remember, if you can't do all the things God is calling you to do and you're unable to find joy in your life, perhaps it's time to do something else, right? Make some changes in your life. Do some new things and see how that works out. Simplifying our lives can help us defeat the desire to have more and more things that we don't actually need. Perhaps the most well-known example of the rich fool in Jesus' day that I can think of comes from the Lord of the Rings movie series. Do you remember that? Do you remember the pathetic creature Gollum? At the end of the final movie, standing at the edge of the cliffs of Doom, the crazy ring-possessed Gollum finally manages to wrestle the ring of power off Frodo's hand by biting off his finger. And dancing about, delirious with the fact that he is finally again in possession of the ring, Gollum doesn't even notice that he's danced right off the edge of the precipice and is falling into the molten lava below, even while he caresses his treasure, whispering, "My precious, my precious." Friends, what do you claim as precious? Is it the things you think are treasures, or something you know is precious? Are you living a self-focused life, clutching to your bosom more and more things for which you have to rent bigger and bigger storage bins and go deeper and deeper into debt for? Or is your precious a love for Christ, a heart for this world, and a love for ministry and mission in his name and for his sake? Are we about building a pristine, serve-yourself church? Or are we intent upon building a church that serves? One that has a well-worn halo glow about it from so much handling and hallowing of the truly precious things of life, the things that actually matter. Now, I said earlier that there are more people alive today than have ever lived in the history of the world. And I also said that most of us suffer from a very serious, very common disease, one that has serious emotional and physical consequences, and you know it. We want more. What I have right now is just not enough. It's serious but treatable if we recognize it for the danger it is, and if we really want to cure it. Hamilton asks us, which tent will you live in? Will you live in and settle for discontent? Or will you choose and thrive in contentment? You and you alone determine which tent will be yours. You choose it in large part by deciding what life is about. If you agree with Jesus and decide that life does not consist in the abundance of possession, well, then you are choosing contentment. For a person of faith, choosing contentment means we look to God as our greatest resource. Giving thanks for what we have, we ask God to give us the right perspective on money and possessions and to change our hearts each day. We decide to live simpler lives, wasting less and conserving more. And we choose to give ourselves more generously to people and causes that we value. And recognizing that since we are the church, who we aspire to be as people is exactly where our church is headed. And we get to choose. And we always have gotten to choose. Let us choose wisely. Let us choose bravely. And continue to move forward with intention. May we follow the God who loves, who guides, who nudges us to choose service to the world and find our satisfaction with what he has already given us and what he has in store for us. You get to choose. Amen. I'd like to invite you to stand as you are able to join in our hymn of response.